couple of you have already joined us. If you have, in the comments, leave where you are watching from. That would be really great. So it's been a very cold week here, as I had mentioned in my comment. We even got to sub-zero temperatures, which was a little hard to bear. Here in my studio, I have a nice heater. You can see it up above here. It's one of those infrared heaters. However, when it's that cold and it is not exactly the best sealed up building, the heater would never shut off, and it never really got the temperature up here up to about maybe 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So consequently, the epoxy work had to be put off. Now the good news is that tomorrow we're supposed to get about 55-degree temperatures here. So welcome to Illinois. It's temperature can move all around. So hopefully I'll get some epoxy work started on actually on the wood duck, and I've actually moved things around here. You can see I got the hull upside down here on my workbench, and that'll be what we'll work on next week, is fiberglassing the exterior of the hull. Now I'd asked you for some questions, and I have quite a few of them. You all responded quite a bit, and I'm going to answer the first one, which was a multi-layered question from Walter S. And he asked quite a few questions about fiberglassing. And he said, first question was, should the entire vessel be sheathed in fiberglass in and out? And the answer is basically yes. If you're going to use fiberglass on the exterior of the hull, you really should have at least resin and fiberglass on the inside, because what makes it a strong structure is that plywood, and many times it's a very thin plywood or a very thin strip, as in the case of the little ock here. And it acts sort of like an I-beam. You know, if an I-beam, you have a webbing and two plates on each side. That's where it gets its strength, is that fiberglass on the inside and the outside. Now the other thing is that if you're sealing the exterior of the boat with fiberglass, you really want the interior sealed also, because moisture can penetrate through a wood structure, and that would cause delamination on the exterior. So it's always good to seal both the inside and outside. Now, it's not necessarily needed to fiberglass the entire inside. Basically, it should be done where you need extra strength. So in the case of the wood duck, we put fiberglass tape on the seams, and in the cockpit, I used an entire sheet of fiberglass cloth, and because there's obviously, you're going to need more strength where you're sitting in the boat. So that would be true with any vessel. You may want to fiberglass, at least in the bilge, where there's going to be people walking around on it, or more internal pressure as well. So his second question was in regards to oakum versus in regards to oakum or Baltic birch plywood, marine plywood, which is better against moisture. Well, marine plywood is marine plywood. It doesn't really matter what species of wood it's made out of. In fact, I've used a lot of marine plywood, those Douglas fir. Now, the important thing to know about marine plywood, because actually on our Boat Building Academy Zoom call this week, one of the fellows asked about just using regular plywood for his rudder. And the answer is, well, the problem is, yes, you're going to sheath the whole thing with fiberglass, so in theory, moisture isn't going to get inside. However, construction grade plywood that you would get at a big box store or any lumber yard for that matter, it may have voids in the middle. So the thing about marine plywood is not only is it glued with water resistant glue like resorcinol, and it's solid core. there are no voids inside of marine plywood. So even though you could have, if you had a void in that plywood and you would sheath it, there still could be moisture in there that could work at rotting away the wood on the inside. So what species of wood doesn't matter, but it does matter that you use marine plywood. I also asked, is it true if epoxy coatings such as West Systems will eventually delaminate when applied to cedar? This is not true. Obviously, I'm going to be applying a epoxy surface to the little op, which is cedar. Most times, the fiberglass cloth or just the resin is stronger than the wood itself. So in any case, if you find a delamination, it probably has more to do with the wood failure than the actual fiberglass failure. So you can apply it over, really, you can apply fiberglass over almost any wood structure. He says, is it true that no amount of fiberglass or marine urethane will prevent water eventually penetrating the wood into the wood layer? The only way it can penetrate the wood layer is if there is actually a hole in it. Now this can happen by you run up against a dock or a rock or something like that, and you put a little nick in there, a tiny little hole, the water can get in there. So the important thing here is that you need to be cautious about, well, when you're using your boat, that you are usually inspecting it, or you do inspect it regularly. And if you have hit something, check that out. You know, it's like if you hit something with your car, you'd go and look and see if it had a scratch. So do the same with your boat. The other question was about using something other than plywood, some non-degradable material. And basically, I don't really know how really have any much experience using some of those synthetic substrates. Basically, my approach is that I really like woodworking and I like working with wood, so I would not use that type of material, and I don't think you would gain any advantage by doing it. Most of the time, it's quite expensive material. Is it true epoxy is stronger and will last longer than polyester resin? Well, there's quite a difference between the two, and I probably could do an entire video on the differences between epoxy or polyester resin. And the epoxy, so I actually looked it up a little bit, and epoxy resin is stronger and more durable than polyester resin, and making it better for structural applications. You have to remember also that epoxy is actually a glue. Polyester resin is less expensive, but it is more brittle and it should not be used without reinforcement. So for example, you just wanted to seal the inside of a boat and all you used was polyester resin. Because it's brittle, it can get little micro cracks in there unless it has some kind of reinforcing cloth in there. I think it was last week I read a comment and somebody asked, they'd seen another YouTube video, and basically what the guy had done in this video is he primed all of the wood before and basically made a bold statement that you should never put fiberglass cloth or fiberglass mat. He was actually using fiberglass mat on a substrate without priming it. And this is absolutely not true. Now, part of that is not true because the epoxy that we're using in this is a low VC. Well, I've got it written down here so I don't forget what it is. It's a low viscosity epoxy, which does not require pre-coating the wood when using a 6-ounce cloth. And in some cases, I've actually used 2 layers of 6-ounce cloth, especially when I built the Tenderly dinghy. The low viscosity epoxy will penetrate and bond the fabric to the substrate without issue. Now, one of the things that is good to know about this is that one person asked, well, why would you not do that? Well, the layer of epoxy on it before that first layer fully sets. Or you have to let it completely cure out, which is not just in 24 hours, is epoxy hours, but probably more like 48 to almost 72 hours when it really, really cures out. And at that point, you would then need to sand it to mechanically bond the next layer to it. That requires a lot of extra time and a lot of extra effort. So the other side of that is, okay, let's say, well, I put the primer on there, but now I'm gonna put the cloth on right away. Well, when that epoxy primer coat is on there and it's starting to set, it's gonna be sticky. And it is nearly impossible to get that fiberglass cloth to lay on there perfectly, because what you want is not to have any air bubbles or wrinkles in that cloth. Now in the next episode, you'll see that I'll be doing that on the wood duck. And what we do is we really get that cloth pre-cut and smoothed out very well. In some cases, I actually use a brush to sort of brush it so that it, almost a static electricity will help it really hug the hull. You can't do that if you got a sticky coat of stuff on there. And I've talked with people who have tried to do that and they've just really ended up with a tremendous mess. So the epoxy that we're using for boat building is a low viscosity epoxy, and it penetrates the cloth very well and into the substructure. And it's quite easy to see when you're doing it, when you're applying it. You can actually see the wood changing color as you would if you're varnishing something. So you know that it's into the wood, and it's very easy to see if you have a little bubble or something that you can then work out with a squeegee or with a roller or something like that. So feel free to ask a question while we're talking here, and I will try to, it's small on my phone, but I'll try to get to it if we can. So let me get back to my list here. I think I kind of went out of order a little bit. So basically the answer to, I would never use your polyurethane resin. I've used it in the past in my sculpture work, and one of the things is it's highly, highly toxic. And if any of you have ever used like an auto filler like Bondo, here's a question, what's that? Oh, it just says thanks. Thanks to you too, Joseph. If you've ever used Bondo, like for an automotive filler, and you've smelled it, it's like very, very pungent. You should really never use it without a respirator or in not even a really well ventilated room is it even acceptable to smell. The epoxy gives off hardly any odor at all, and you can see, you know, here in my studio, I have a lot of air volume in here and air movement. So I'll wear a respirator, but I don't usually when I'm on camera, just because I'm either talking or something like that. So it's not necessary if you're in a well-ventilated area. So I have found a polyester resin to be just really nasty stuff to work with. And other than the cost, I see absolutely no benefit to using it. So I should also mention a little bit about the cost of epoxy resins. There have been boat builders that have purchased a 5-to-1 epoxy mix as opposed to a 2-to-1. Now the 2-to-1 is 2 parts resin to 1 part hardener, and the 5-to-1 is 5 parts resin to 1 part hardener. Those epoxies give off much, much more what we call a mean blush, and it's a kind of a non-visible waxy surface that floats to the surface of the epoxy as it's cured, and a subsequent layer will not stick to it because it's got that waxy feeling to it. It's nearly impossible to really get it off efficiently. So if you're buying epoxy for your boat project, always buy the 2-to-1. It really doesn't matter which brand you're getting. Just make sure you get the 2-to-1, not the 5-to-1. Another question is, how many layers of fiberglass do you recommend for durability? And I think he is specifically asking in terms of cold molding. And cold molding, you have to realize that not only is the fiberglass cloth being a part of the structure, but also the layers of wood. So in cold molding, for those of you that don't know, you start with a thin layer of very thin wood, and then on a diagonal to that, you put another coat of wood fibers or wood veneer or thin wood. We'll say something like maybe 1/8 of an inch thick or something like that. Once that's set and cured, then you do another diagonal going the opposite direction. And in some cases, when you want the boat to be bright, you put a 4th layer so that they would actually look like planks on the boat. All of that then is covered with a fiberglass cloth. Now there's another YouTube channel that is really well done. It's called A Boat by a River. And it's a young couple down in Tasmania, which Tasmania, you know, is just south of Australia. And they are building a Paul Gart-style boat, and it is being cold molded. So if you're interested in cold molding, you could check their channel out and look at some of the earlier videos where they're actually doing some of the veneer stripping. And I believe maybe in just the last maybe 2 or 3 episodes, they started putting the fiberglass cloth on it. There's a question, let me see what I can see. Look, went away too fast for me. So basically, the durability of cold molding is all of those multiple layers. Essentially, you're building a hull surface that is fiberglass, or I mean like plywood. So as you know, plywood has opposing grains going to it to give it its strength. But in general, fiberglass for durability, you know, if it's just on the exterior of the hull, 1 layer is usually fine. In some cases where you want more durability, the inside, you could put more than 1 layer of fiberglass. In the case of the little Auk, one of the things I'm planning on doing, mainly because I'm a little curious about how it works, but also it'll add some strength to the cockpit area, and that is using fiber carbon. It's of course more expensive, but it is something that I'm interested in learning more about, so I'm going to use it on the little Auk. When drilling into fiberglass hulls with wood underneath to install railing, windlass, etc., can you pre-drill and fill the holes with urethane sealer to prevent water intrusion? Or is there a better technique? So the technique that I like to use is, let's say that I want to put a screw in the deck and or a anchor through the deck. And what I'll do is drill an oversized hole that is bigger than what I desire. I'll then put tape on the bottom and fill the hole with epoxy. Then, after the epoxy is fully cured, I'll come back in and then drill the smaller hole that I desire in through that epoxy. So basically what I do is I get a little ring of epoxy sealing the inside of that plywood substrate, or it doesn't have to be plywood, it could simply be any kind of wood, but it's good to seal the inside of it. So that's what I do, is to drill an oversized hole, fill it with epoxy, and then drill the size hole you want in the center of that. And it's really important that you drill it carefully so you do get in the center and that you're not drifted to one side. And if your screw came through and cut into the wood, then that would not be good. And the other thing is, if you're putting things on a deck, like a railing or something, I would then also use bedding compound. I prefer dolphinite, which is very forgiving, and if for some reason you needed to take it off, it will come off. That's this question here. And by planning on painting a kayak and building a small Glenelg boat, I am planning on painting part of the kayak. The bottom of the wood duck up to the water line, I'm planning on painting that. And I'm planning on painting the inside of the wood duck a color as well. So, let's see. Well, Jim M asked if you would explain the setup of the bow and stern strips, where they come together, and you have to strip around the stations. I'm going to move the camera here in a minute and turn the camera around. So I'm going to answer that question then. I did cover this pretty well in, I believe, episode 5, where I strip planking the ock. So you can also check out that video where I have used water and a heat gun to bend the strip. Let's see, F. Gromer asks, we actually did answer that about wetting the wood with fiberglass first. So he also had a follow-up question. It was like, what is the weight of the cloth and that I've been using? It's 6-ounce cloth, and the tape is 9 ounce. It's just a little bit heavier. In the little tender that I built for Steve, for the tender for for Arabella, I used 4-ounce cloth on the inside and outside. And the main reason for that is I was trying very hard by the client's request to keep the weight of the boat down, which is another question that some have asked about why, when I did the interior of the wood duck, why I just didn't fiberglass the whole thing. Well, you have to realize when you're adding glass cloth, you're also adding resin. So in a kayak build especially, weight is really a very important factor, because you're going to be picking this boat up, putting it on top of your luggage rack, on your boat rack, on top of your car, or you're going to be lifting it because you have to portage from one stream to the other. So it doesn't take very long for a few pounds extra, it becomes wearing on you. So the other side is a lot of times I get some of my boat builders ask about wanting to change the plans. And basically my standard answer is follow the plans. And one of the things by doing that is that you're really honoring what the naval architect came up with. And I trust the naval architect well more than any of us trying to second guess that person into adding more information or more strength, or, unfortunately I think there's a feeling out there in boat builders that if a little is good, more is better. And that definitely is not true. So anyway, like I said, 6-ounce cloth is what I'm using with 9-ounce tape. Felipe asks, should I wait for the epoxy to dry on the seams, or is it possible to go with the tape right after applying it? Now what he means by dry, he means cure. Epoxy does not dry, it cures. It's a chemical reaction that happens. And the answer is yes, you can. And actually in the case of the, where's the other on my shoulder? The deck here, when I did that, was the second thing I did. And so I was running a little bit later in my day, and I put the fillets down, and they just became set a little bit. It wasn't like it was fresh. And then I laid the tape on there. And I believe in that video you can see where I put the tape on, there's a few little dark spots where the resin in the fillet has bled into the tape. So yes is the answer. You can do that. You can put the tape directly on top of a fillet, even though the fillet has not fully cured. And actually is a very good way to make sure that it all bonds together really well, because that is really what we're interested in when we're adding epoxy to another epoxy coat, is we really want to get all of those chemical bonds to work together and mate together with each coat. And that's why when we have an epoxy coating on where we've let it cure, why we need to sand it so that we can get that mechanical bond between the two. Now, in some cases, that sanding doesn't require much more than a Scotch-Brite, but it still needs to be done. So. Don B. asked about the Boat Building Academy, and he was interested in knowing, like, well, how does it work, what's it cost, and how to join. Well, the Boat Building Academy, as some of you may know in earlier episodes, where some of the members had come here and helped out, especially with Joseph, Pat, and Matt, who helped strip the little lock. So the Boat Building Academy is about 4 years old now, right? Currently we have about 30 boat builders in it. We also have, in addition to myself, 3 other mentors, and those are Ann Bryant, who is a really well-known journalist, videographer, and basically just a strong advocate for boat building, and an amazing sailor, I might add. So Ann has been a part of the Academy for more than a year now. Also, John Brooks, who is the designer of the Salt Sound and the author of Glued Lap Straight Plywood Boat, is a mentor. And just recently, in the last month, Nick Schotted has joined, and as many of you know, Nick Schotted is the foremost authority on kayak building and kayak designs. So Nick has joined us on our calls also. So it's not just myself answering all of these questions, but it's a team of people, and in many cases, some of the other boat builders have run across some of the questions that arise. So those meetings are held once a week on Thursday afternoons on Zoom, and they usually go not more than 2 hours, and I think the last one, which was a little longer, was maybe an hour and 20 minutes or something like that. We get a lot of boat builders that tune in just to listen. Generally, I give everybody an opportunity to talk about their project and where they're at on their project. So it's has built quite a community, and some of these guys, including myself with them, have created some really strong friendship bonds. And many of them have traveled here to help me out here in my studio. Like, for example, Joseph was from Hood River, Oregon, so they come from far and wide. And also, usually a couple of times a year, we try to do a little bit of an in-person retreat. And the in-person retreat is usually at one of the boat shows, either at the boat show out at Mystic, Connecticut in the spring, or the Wooden Boat Festival out at Port Townsend in the fall. During those, we have organized tours. About a year ago, when we were out on the East Coast, we went and visited the Herreshoff Museum and had a private tour with the curator. We went to some salvage yards and also visited some other boat builders that were working on their boats. We even went and visited a sailmaker. So those are all kind of in-person parts of the workshop, or part of the academy. So the cost is, it's a lifetime cost. And to give you a little reference, if you were to go out to the Wooden Boat School, the tuition for a one-week class is usually around $900, $950 for the week. If you were to take the 2-week fundamentals class, you're spending nearly $2,000 in tuition, and you have to get yourself there. So all in all, you could end up spending, anywhere between $2,500 and $3,500 for 2 weeks. And then it's a one-and-done class. When it's done, it's done. So with our lifetime cost of the academy, it is $700 for a lifetime to join. And it is also, I have scholarships available from some very generous funders, and we can also set up payment plans for many. Actually like to do a payment plan over about a year or so. Now, how to apply? You can search, and I believe it's in the description in the recording of this, and that is the Boat Building Academy, and there's more information there, and also how you can apply and join the group. If you can't find those links, you can always just direct email me and I'll set you up with an appointment. So Tim C. asked me how many hours it took to build the Haven. And the Haven, well, actually, I don't know, is the quick ones. I don't know how long it took me, because it was over a number of years, and in there I built another boat. I don't typically keep track of those things. And also because I'm filming and editing, it also adds a certain amount of time to any project. However, maybe about 2 years ago, we had a fellow named John who joined the Boat Building Academy and wanted to build a Haven. Now, I'm going to preface this with that he was a professional furniture builder, so he had ample experience and he had a really well-equipped shop. So he did keep track of all of his hours. Let's see what this question is. I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. Does the class include lofting? And the answer is yes. We do talk about lofting. We actually talk about all aspects of boat building in the academy. So, but at any rate, John wanted to build a Haven. He had never built a boat before. Because he was, his profession was woodworking, he kept track of his hours and had a very rigid schedule that he worked on. I believe he finished his Haven within a year. He did pretty much all of the work himself with the exception of the sails and the hardware, which he purchased. And he, in that period of time, he spent 1,500 hours building his Haven. So, if you divide that up by about 20 to 28 hours a week, which is a pretty rigorous schedule to be working on a boat, it took him a little over a year. I believe it took him 14 months to finish it. And of course, he didn't work on it every day. He also had a life that he spent doing other things. So somebody asked, well, thank me. He said, thanks for the side-by-side comparison. I'm a beginner, so I would like the ease of the stitch and glue, but I would also like to know how, sorry, I'm not a very good out loud reader. I'm a beginner, so I like the ease of stitch and glue, but I also like how strip planks work. Is there any recommendations? Well, fortunately, if you're interested in the wood duck, or actually quite a few boats that Chesapeake sells, they sell hybrid kits. And what a hybrid kit is that you do both. The writing is so small, so I'm leaning in to read it. I will answer that in a second. They call it their hybrid kit. So the hull is stitch and glue, and the deck is strip plank. So if you're interested in both, that would probably, and you're a beginner, that would be a really good way to get started, is to buy one of the hybrid kits. And it's not just the wood duck. Many of their stitch and glue kits come as a hybrid. Steve C. asked, well, I'll answer that question that popped up. Want to know if I'm going to be in Mystic, and the answer is yes. I'll be in Mystic, and hopefully I'll be there with the finished little lock. Steve C. asked, I'd like to cut my own strips. can I buy a kit without strips? And the answer is yes, you can. You can buy from CLC, and I wrote this down this morning. Well, first of all, the full kit is this is for the little off, is $1,685. If you can also, some of the options is you can just buy the forms and the strong back, and it is $375. And then the other thing is that you can buy just the forms for $225. And finally, you can buy the plans alone for $105. So in fact, let me show you real quickly. Here, we'll flip the camera around. Over here to the bench. Oops. These are the plans for the little ock. You can see this is essentially the line plan here on the first page. And it's not easy to do with one hand. So the first page here shows the layout of the boat, shows pretty much all of the information you need there. And then this page and subsequent pages show, sorry, the light in here is not the best, but you can see it shows all of the forms, and these are full-size patterns. So what most builders that do this is they will use spray mint glue the form directly to their mold material, and then cut it out either on a bandsaw or with a jigsaw. So this is a really good option for those of you that want to really build the boat from start to finish on your own. So the other thing, now let's go back here and talk about the strips that was asked. And on this side, so the shadow, the camera isn't there. There's a form right here. Actually, let's see if I can find it. It's right here. There is a form, and these, especially in this boat, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it's curving this way, and at this point here, it curves. It's concave, and here it's convex. So the strips really need to do more than they will do on their own. So, as I had mentioned earlier about that other video where I take from about here out and I wet the strip and then I twist it and then dry it with a heat gun, and that works really well. Now, in the next episode or so, what we'll be doing is, so this is the, this is the stern, not the stem. Here it is. So this is the pattern for the external stem. It's upside down, so it goes this way. So you can see I've got to trim off and get this to fit in there. And I will make this, of course, out of a piece of Alaskan yellow cedar, so that'll fit in there. So that'll be probably in about 2 episodes. I'll be forming this to the bow and to the stem, or to the stern, sorry. So one of the other things I know we're running a little later on time than I said it'd be, but one of the other things that someone asked about, well, they didn't ask, basically they commented and saying that in the forms that were in here, that I beveled them so they all lay in there. And his comment, actually I wrote the comment down, let's see what he said here. So I get it. So he said, there's no need to shave off the corners of the template. Well, by template, I think he means the form. You may have gotten away with this build, but I know guys that have had nothing but trouble with a canoe build. Well, if I would say it's absolutely the opposite, that especially where there's a form, and I said, I can feel it down here where this form is, and I just explained on how much those need to bend, that you really do need to bevel the templates, or the, not templates, wrong word. You need to bevel the forms. Even a midship, where it's not as much, what happens if you don't do that is this is only sitting on one little edge of the form, and it's very, you really need to then clamp it just on that little edge, where if you beveled it, you've got the whole surface of that form to push it against. So my experience is almost any boat building book that you will read about that's, let's turn around here again. Any boat building you'd read about setting up a strong back and forms are going to talk about beveling the forms. So, and my experience has been people that haven't done that have gotten themselves in bigger trouble than people that have. So I respectfully disagree with that. So, at any rate, it's been 40 minutes. I promised 30. I didn't know I could talk this much. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will see you the next time on the Outer Boat Building, where we will be fiberglassing the exterior hull of the Wood Duck. So thanks again for watching, and I'll see you the next time on the Art of Boat Building.